Hi everyone, this is a tutorial for how to get squash and stretch in your 2D Godot games. So here's an example of what we'll be making at the end of this. Alright, so let's get started. The first thing that we need to do is first note we need to use move and slide for this. Move and slide is a method on kinematic body 2Ds, which is what my player is. It's a method on kinematic body 2Ds that basically defines their movement, or it makes them move. But in addition to the movement vector, which you pass move and slide, you'll also be passing it a vector, or you can also pass it a vector too, which defines the direction of up, which you do need in your game if you want to add a jump system, I assume. So it doesn't matter how long this vector 2 is, but it does have to point in the direction that you want to be up in your game. So for here, I have passed it this constant up, which is vector 2, 0, negative 1, which points just 1 pixel straight up. All right. So using this first allows use of the isOnFloor function, which is a predefined function in Godot, which tests if it's on floor relative to the up vector that you pass move and slide. All right. So let's start this by first modifying our jump thing to do sprite, which is the name of my sprite node. Whatever the name of your sprite node is, just access that. Sprite.scale is equal to vector2 0.75 comma 1.25. All right. So basically what this does is, let's look at this here and then I can explain to you exactly what's happening. So setting the vector or setting the scale to 0.75, 1.25 as a vector 2. Where is this? Where'd the game go? Okay, here we go. So what this does is it makes the x scale 0.75, or in other words, it squishes it in by 25% on x, and it makes the y scale 1.25, so it makes it taller by 25% on y. So you'll notice this isn't exactly the desired result, because now we're perpetually like this, which doesn't look great. So let's fix that. isOnFloor, if isOnFloor, sprite.scale is equal to vector2 1.25, 1.35 is probably better actually, 0.65. So you'll notice that these two numbers, when I increased this scale x, I also shrunk scale y by the same amount. And that's because when you're squashing and stretching sprites, the volume, as a general rule, should stay the same, because by stretching and by squashing and stretching them, you're making them feel really bouncy and rubbery, and you're not actually increasing their size. You're just deforming them. Is the look that we're going for here. So you'll notice that here after we do this, we've got a decent jump, and then he just lands flat like that. That doesn't look great, because now he's stuck in this position, which doesn't really help us. So let's do this. Oh, by the way, I did this before, but if you haven't, set the offset here to be on the bottom of your sprite, or else it'll look wrong. So normally most sprites start like this with the offset, or like the center point. I guess the anchor point is how you'd know it if you're familiar with the Adobe software, I guess. The anchor point is in the center of the sprite. You want the anchor point to be at the bottom of the sprite, and here is why. Right now it's at the center, and it'll look very wrong when we're on the floor, because you'll notice this is here because it's squishing it at the same amount from the center. But if you set the offset here to the bottom of the sprite, which I will do right now, it squishes into the bottom, which looks less broken. All right, so you'll notice this looks really wrong. So this is where the jumped variable comes in. Var jumped is equal to false. This variable will store whether or not we've jumped. So when we press the jump button, obviously we've jumped. So let's set that here. We only want this landing scale, I guess. We only want it to look like it's landed if it's actually landed, and not just is on the ground. So we'll do if jumped, set this, and also jumped equals false, so this doesn't repeat. That's really weird. I have no idea why that's happening. No, I have no idea why that's happening. Why is that happening? What? Found the issue. Var jumped equals false, so I'm declaring a new local variable called jumped instead of accessing the global variable jumped. This should fix it. Except not really. And the reason why this was actually intended, this wasn't me being a buffoon, the reason why it does that is because nothing's actually resetting the sprite scale. So it just stays like this. Even though this code isn't running, it just stays like that because nothing's reset it. So sprite.scale is equal to vector2 1 1. Okay, so now we have a new issue, right? This only happens for a frame. So it doesn't look like it's fallen, it just looks like the game bugged out. So, how are we going to fix this? Easy, lerp, linear interpolation. I'll explain this, I'll just write the code and then I'll explain it. Sprite.scale is equal to lerp slurp. Sprite.scale vector211. This 0.1 sounds like a nice number to use for this. Alright, so what this does is lerp stands for linear interpolation, which is probably a word that I said earlier. Basically, it moves from this object, from this position, I guess, to this position by this amount every time it runs. So in this case, this is going to run every frame that our character is on the floor. So that means 60 times per second. The sprite scale is going to be moved while we're on the floor. I think 75 times per second actually because of this monitor. The sprite scale is going to be moved. It's physics frames. The sprite scale is going to be moved 10% closer to the default size 1 1. And so you might notice that it'll never actually reach 1 1. It will because you can't store an infinite number of floats or infinite number of you don't have an infinite amount of storage for numbers. Floats can only be so many bits. But if this was ideal computer science land, it would never be the same because this would be a limit. But even if it were, it wouldn't matter because it gets close enough that the player can't tell the difference anyway. And we designed for the player, not for magical computer science land. All right, so this still looks really stilted. And the reason why, if you haven't found it out yet, is because one, jumping immediately after landing looks super broken. Like letting 1 or 2 frames play and then jumping looks super broken. And also, jumping just immediately sets your character to this, which looks super weird. So instead, now that we know lerp, we can just make this lerp. So, I'll speed this up. Lerp what? So let's do this. So this doesn't actually work if you've noticed. Wonder why? It's because this moves it 25%, but only when you're on the ground and when you're pressing this. So only for 1 frame. Instead, we're going to move this from here to just happening while you have jumped and you're in the air. Because if you don't do this while you've jumped, it breaks. And I don't know why. It really shouldn't, but if you don't have this jumped logic here, if you just move on X, I can actually just demonstrate by killing this line really quickly. And moving this down. For some reason, if you move on X, it'll also do that, and that looks really wrong, and I don't know why this happens. I have a guess, but I don't have it confirmed. I don't... This shouldn't happen, though. But it does, and so we have the jump logic here. So what we're sacrificing is that false won't do this, but you can use different fall logic, and I think it'll probably work. So, let's try this now. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's actually set this faster. This looks wrong as is. This still looks super broken when you just jump and you let like one of the fall frames play and then you just jump. It still looks very broken. So to fix this, inside of this, we're just gonna do sprite dot scale is equal to vector 2 1 1. So it resets to normal the frame that you jump, and this will look fine. Okay, well, it would look fine if the sprite was smaller, but right now the sprite is massive, so it doesn't look that great. It still looks serviceable, though. It looks less broken, which is sort of what we're going for. All right, thanks for watching. How do I end this?